live by the already high standards of exotic and powerful supercars and luxury cars, today is a very, very special day. And that's because it's not every day that a brand new Aston Martin comes on the scene. And it's even rarer for us to get to drive one of them here in India. But hey, the name's D'Souza, Gavin D'Souza. And this is the Aston Martin DB12. Now, Aston Martin is being bold enough to say that this is an all-new kind of car. It's not a supercar, it's not a Grand Tourer, it's a Super Tourer. Now that seems like a whole lot of marketing fluff, to be honest, but why not put it to the test? Let's see what they mean. But even before turning a wheel, the first thing a supercar or even a Grand Tourer for that matter has to do is look the part. And to see if it does, let's leave the road for a minute and head back to the bright lights of the Autocar India studio for a closer look. Now, ordinarily, while talking about styling, I'd probably say something like looks are subjective and it might not be for everybody, but come on, who are we kidding? I think everybody agrees this is universally a very, very sexy piece of kit. Aston Martin always knocks it out of the park, don't they? And off late, they've really been creating some amazing designs. Now, this is obviously an evolution of the DB11, but think of it as a DB11 that's been on some steroids. That same elegant shape remains, the perfect proportions for a 2+2 GT coupe, but it's bulging, bursting at the seams at every possible corner. Look at this massive grille. It's grown so much, and it's tipped forward, and it really gives that aggression. This storm purple paint is surely helping things. But here we have more strakes on the bonnet. We have slightly larger headlamps with the new 3-element LED DRL signature up front. And yes, these big air intakes down the front. It's mirrored over to the side by these air vents on the sides that pull out air from the front wheel arches, and of course the new 21-inch wheels that look really nice and aggressive. There are also loads of interesting details. I like the fact that the mirrors are now fixed in that the glass doesn't move, the whole mirror moves when you adjust it, and that's just such a cool detail. And of course, with all Aston Martins, the doors open slightly upwards, and that's just a fantastic little thing for you to spot when you see one of these out on the road. Around the rear is where things haven't changed all that much. Yes, it's 22 millimeters wider, and you can spot that in those hips back there, but really, it's not too far removed from what we saw on the DB11, and that's no bad thing at all, is it? It's still incredibly elegant and incredibly intricate, even housing some active aero bits. But that's just me. What do you think about the Aston Martin DB12's design? Let us know down in the comments. Wow. As I take a moment to pick my jaw up off the floor, why don't we step inside, because there's another treat waiting in there. Now, while the exterior might bear some resemblance to its predecessor, the DB11, inside here, this is definitely a brand new generation car, and that's really been the focus of the DB12. And this interior is something that will filter down into every other Aston Martin, and it makes a very good first impression. Quality is up for sure. The stitching, the leather, it was always really good in previous Aston Martins. In the DB11, it felt like a bunch of quality materials that perhaps weren't put together as well, but they've really gone and fixed that out here. There are still a few traces of Mercedes, like this stock, but by and large, everything is bespoke Aston Martin this time around. The design, I think, has lost some of that Aston Martin charm. You know, the old button gear selector that used to be a characteristic of all Aston Martins, that's gone. It's now just a conventional start-stop button here, and of course paddles, which by the way have shifted from the column to the steering wheel, so they turn with you. I prefer it, some people don't, but the main thing is this new flowing waterfall center console, as Aston Martin likes to call it. The AC vents are now these slim things. They look a little bit ordinary in my opinion, but otherwise it's just so well built and so well organized that you might not mind it at all. There are physical buttons for just about everything, and I'm glad Aston Martin has stuck to that. Even the gear selector, a nice toggle switch over here. Miss the buttons, but frankly this is easier to use. Lovely rotary dials for the AC and the volume, and yes, physical buttons for all these controls. Only the seat heating and cooling seem to be capacitive, but we'll let that one slide. This rotary dial here serves as the start stop button as well as the mode selector, which is really neat. The new steering wheel, it's actually round this time. The DB11 steering wheel was famously or infamously square, but they've made amends and it is full of controls. But really, the big talking point is the new electrical and electronic architecture in the DB12. Gone is the old Mercedes system. It is very much a touchscreen now. It's located over here. It's Aston Martin's own design. It's very smooth, it's very crisp, and it's very well featured. And the other screen is this digital instrument cluster in front of me. Now again, very high resolution, lots of very informative graphics over here, but the execution again is just a bit ordinary for a car like this. I wish there was a bit more hooded binnacle, a bit more drama. It's just a rectangular screen in front of you. Small nitpick, but when you're spending this kind of money, you know. Now, this car might be trimmed in a rather boring and dull grey on black color, but there's no doubting the material quality, the leather, the stitching is all superb. And if you dig into Aston Martin's Q catalogue, you can really spec it up to be quite extravagant and quite exciting. You'll also notice that there is a glove box, unlike in the old DB11, which just didn't have one. And Bowers and Wilkins sound system that I can report sounds very good. Excellent job with the cockpit area then, but this is a Grand Tourer and more importantly a 2+2 seater. But well, about that. As you can probably tell, there's not a whole lot of space back here in the back seat of the DB12. I'm just under 5'8". This is set to my position, and even then my knees aren't quite making it without connecting with the back of this seat. My head is also grazing the roof liner and it's a pretty snug fit, and the backrest section is rather firm. There are a lot of Bowers and Wilkins speakers though, and it's nice that the seat belts come out from the center. That's a pretty cool little touch. But let's just put it this way, if you're going to do some grand touring, treat this as a two-seater, but for the occasional trip out for dinner with your friends, maybe this will work. Grand touring also requires luggage, but with just 262 liters in the boot, your best shot is a couple of small bags. And with that out of the way, let's get back on the road because I'm keen to see how super this Tourer is to drive. As the car's name suggests, this is the successor to the DB11. But unlike what it might suggest, it doesn't use a V12 engine. No, this DB12 is powered by the AMG sourced 4-liter twin-turbo V8 only. Now before you start scoffing, it's not that bad an idea because not only does this V8 make more power and torque than the old V12 did, 680 horsepower and 800 Newton meters of it. It also allows the DB12 to be a full 100 kilos lighter than if it had the V12. That is a huge weight saving and it pays dividends in the dynamics department. But this is not just your standard AMG V8 engine. Somehow Aston Martin has managed to put its own little spin on it. We noticed this first with the DBX 707, and it's even more apparent here somehow. There's a greater fluidity to the way the power is delivered. It's not that sledgehammer punch that we're used to from Mercedes AMGs. Power rolls in rather than punching in. And that's a whole different sensation altogether. This is complemented by the gearbox, the 8-speed automatic, which isn't quite as manic as you might expect. Yup, it's the same trusty ZF 8-speed torque converter automatic that we know from so many luxury and performance cars, only here it's mounted at the back. At its core, this is a smooth and luxurious gearbox meant for brisk cruising, and that suits this car's GT credentials really well. But that's not always a good thing. At times, it does feel like a bit of a shortcoming when you're absolutely going for it, because it is a bit slow to respond if you suddenly step on it out of nowhere. Once you've got a rhythm going though, it's nice and quick and seamless. These are nice, cool, metallic feeling paddles. Really goad you on. And they also stretch quite tall and low down. So even if your hands do fall on another part of the steering wheel, you can snap onto these paddles quite easily. And dare I say, Aston Martin's made this engine sound even better than AMG does. Now, I was lucky enough to have a very brief go in the 12-cylinder version of the DB11, and I can tell you right away that this is so much sharper and quicker and responsive than that car was. That was a lot softer and more on the luxurious side of things. This has not lost any of that, but it's also managed to be a lot sportier, especially when you pop it into Sport Plus mode, like I have it in now. And through the corners, while it's certainly gamely and the steering is quite quick, it's not quite as aggressive as something like, say, a Ferrari. Push too hard in the rear end will break loose quite easily, despite those 325 section Pilot Sport 5S's. It also doesn't feel quite as tied down to the road as its strong power figures might make you think. As a result, you're inclined to pull back a little bit and drive it at about 8 or 9 tenths, and it's just that much more enjoyable that day. Again, cruising, loping, and not attacking corners on a racetrack. That's the difference. So it has the look of a supercar, the sound and the presence and the power, but not quite the dynamics, so perhaps it's better to rethink that little piece of marketing. So yeah, I get what they mean when they say super tourer, and it's not just to do with the amount of its ability, but in the breadth of it too. Think of it this way, if the DB11 was a 55-inch flat screen television, this DB12 is still a 55-inch flat screen television, except that it's gone from HD to 4K. There's just much greater definition to everything. It's moved its own goalposts. When it's comfortable, it's even more comfortable. When it's sporty, it's even sportier. There's just more of everything and a lot more space in between for you to play around in. It's that middle ground, that grand touring area where you want comfort and you want speed, not too much, not too little of either. That's where this car absolutely excels. Now we have to put it in the context of its closest rivals, and in India at least, I think that would be the Ferrari Roma and the Bentley Continental GT. The Ferrari is all about aggression, speed, quick steering, responsive engine. And yeah, though it is a grand tourer, it does make you want to push it hard. Whereas the Bentley is more about loping along gently, smoothly. It's more about luxury. They exist at both ends of the front engine grand touring spectrum. And would you believe it if I told you, this car flops right in the middle. Yep. It's got some of the sharpness of the Ferrari, some of the luxurious feel of the Bentley. And the best part is, through that little drive mode selector, you can choose a mix that's perfect for you and perfect for any situation you throw at it. At no point is it too uncomfortable, and yeah, it has enough ground clearance to actually handle most speed breakers without a no-slip kit. However, there is one slight problem, and that's the price. At 4.6 crore rupees ex-showroom and before options, it's considerably more expensive than the Ferrari Roma, and unfortunately, without the V12 engine, it's not as easy as before to justify that premium. But really what you're paying for is the exclusivity of Aston Martin. Now, is that worth the premium? That's something you gotta ask yourself. One thing I can tell you from behind the wheel and spending a whole day with this car today, the DB12 doesn't do a whole lot wrong. It's equal parts sharp, plush, and oh so desirable, and would not feel out of place pulling up to an exotic boutique hotel, a royal palace, or an industrialist daughter's wedding. Aston Martins have always done things a little differently, and this DB12 does too. It remains the one that goes against the grain, and for those who take the plunge, there's little it cannot do. Thank you for watching.